Okay, good morning and welcome to the next keynote session from Birmingham Tech Week. We are joined today by Bruno Moraes, who is the country manager for Wayra, and he's going to be covering 5G and the West Midlands. But before we get underway, I just want to thank the partners which the week and this year is being run in association with. We've got Tech Nation, we've got the West Midlands Growth Company, and the Department for International Trade. And I just want to say thank you for the work they do, not only across the UK, but also across the West Midlands as well. Each organisation champions lots of opportunities and exciting initiatives throughout the region, but also encouraging kind of new opportunities to come into the region as well, both nationally and internationally. So great to have their support this week. And of course, so the week wouldn't be possible without the generous help and support of our sponsors. So we have NatWest, who are the lead sponsor for Birmingham Tech Week, and they do a phenomenal job across the entrepreneurial landscape in Birmingham and the West Midlands and across the UK as well. And then we have Copper, Culture Group, BJSS, Side Trade, and BMET. So thank you to each and every one of you for being involved in this year. And then, of course, all of our partners. So here's a snapshot of just some of the partners involved in Birmingham Tech Week from across the private and public sector as well. And today we're going to hear from one of our partners, Wayra and Bruno. So Bruno, if we can start by kind of getting you to introduce yourself, telling us a little bit more about Wayra, but also your role in your career to date as well.
Thank you, Yanis. So thank you everyone for attending. My name is Bruno Moraes, and I'm the country manager at Wayra UK. So Wayra is the open innovation hub of Telefónica, and Telefónica in the UK is O2. We work to complement our corporate product portfolio with propositions from startups and scale-ups, and we offer to those companies our sales channel to produce growth on both sides, on Telefónica side and on the startup side. We also support the startups with knowledge, capital, and technology. So we invest in those startups. And in that sense, we are always looking for the best startups that can develop real business opportunities with Telefónica. Right, and once we identify them, we invest in them, and then we have a dedicated business development team that will work alongside with the startups and Telefónica and make sure that those connections happen. Right, we know that corporates and startups, they quite often speak different languages, and we act as the translators between those two languages. Wayra has been in the UK since 2012. At the beginning, our focus was earlier stage startups. We are changing this focus now into more mature startups, as we learned along the way that those startups are better prepared to take advantages of the business opportunities that we generate. Right. So in summary, I would say that we do 5 things, right? We do innovation scouting. We have a dedicated team focusing in finding the best startups that can develop business with Telefónica or some of our partners anywhere in the world. We are a corporate venture capital. We invest. We have invested in the UK in almost 200 startups, globally in more than 500. We do business development, business generation. That's the main focus of Wayra. We have generated more than £200 million in contracts between Telefónica and the startups. We have corporate partnerships, so we work with other corporates, with government, with universities to bring all of the best access to our entrepreneurs. And we also have vertical programs focusing on one particular vertical. In the UK, we currently have 4 of them. The Cyber Accelerator in partnership with the NCSC, Intelligent Mobility in partnership with Amy and Hyundai, Health Hub with Novartis, and finally Spring with West Midlands 5G. That's in a nutshell what is Wayra.
So a hell of a lot then, really, Bruno, right?
Yeah, we do a lot.
So you must come across a lot of startups in your role and across Wayra. Talk to me about some of the successful ones and the characteristics that make them successful. I think a lot of the entrepreneurs and startups would like to hear about what they should be looking to do.
Yeah, so in O2, the main focus is B2B startups due to characteristics of the business. It's probably 60 to 70% of what Wayra does in the UK. In other countries globally, it's more. It's probably 50-50. We do B2B and B2C. There is a variety of startups that are successful working with Telefónica. You mentioned 3 things that are important. So, or 2 things that are important, and 1 characteristic that also happened a few times. So they have to have the characteristics of our market here. They have to have a mature product, because we are helping bring those startups to other corporate clients, which then require a product that is solid and consistent. This is like very important for corporate. So that's one of the reasons we are focusing our investments now in more mature startups. Not only the product, but the support the product also has to be in place, as this is usually required by the corporate. The second is that they have to solve a real problem with measurable impact. It has, I mean, those are the startups that were really successful working with us. And many of them, this is like the third characteristic, many of them, they started as internal use. We started using those startups to solve some problems that Telefónica or O2 had. And later, we decide jointly to offer that product to O2's customers. So one of the interesting examples that we have here is RotaGig, which is a scheduling tool. We started using that to manage the staff in O2 stores. Very successful, and now it's a product that O2 offers to many retailers and even to other sectors like hospitality and hospitals. But it's something that we tried, we saw the impact, and then we brought to our customers.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that the specific point you made as well around kind of real problems. I think sometimes entrepreneurs think they're solving a problem, but unless they've got the traction around it, it's really just a hypothesis at that stage. And it's really good to see as well, kind of focusing on specific areas, but then expanding the proposition out as well. So it's got a larger market opportunity. Really sound insight and advice there, Bruno. And I guess kind of building on that a little bit more, what would your advice be to kind of startups and entrepreneurs who are looking to approach corporates and organizations like O2 and Telefónica. You know, there's do's and there's don'ts, and there's certainly pitfalls to avoid. So can you give some advice on that?
Yeah. Yes, let me just look in a bit different perspective, just to begin with, and then go directly to that. So corporates, they are intrinsically slow to innovate, right? But we know that corporates cannot afford not to innovate. They have some speed disadvantage, but an enormous reach advantage. So combining what we want to do ultimately is to combine startup speed and corporate scale, and that's let's say when we can do that, that's the sweet spot of innovation and of growth, right? In the case of Telefónica, the objective was to be close to the startups at the beginning, but it's now the possibility to offer a much wider product portfolio. So in terms of do's and don'ts and tips and approaches for startups, right? I think the first one is, while corporates today are much more open to do pilots, right? To do to try some integrations. The onus is really on the startup to find the right match. The entrepreneur has to have very clear at the beginning of the relationship on what they want from that relationship. It can be many things. It can be market knowledge. It can be market access. It can be having the corporate as a customer, as was the case in some companies that approached us. It can be technical expertise, business expertise, data, customer database, a distribution network, funding. So we play in many of those areas. But it's very important for the entrepreneur to know what they want, so they can focus the relationship on the needs of their startup, right? And then I think that, but after knowing that, I think what will make it very successful is how they approach the solution and identify a corporate pain point and solve that pain point. And that many times in corporates also involves finding the right stakeholders, which in many cases the stakeholders are not those that have the pain points. It can be different people, so that some people have the pain points and someone else will have the possibility to solve it. So you have to play those two things. Then you have, of course, to align your product offering around those pain points. And you also have to, from the beginning, define the type of relationship you want to have with the corporate. What is the vision? What is really the business? Are you aligned, right? Last but not least, I think it's important before formalizing a partnership to spend some time to getting to know each other. You have to go on a date first, right? And see if that's the right partnership, if you get the benefits. And I think that works for both sides, right? That's important. What else I would say? It's important. There are some issues that should be solved right from the beginning. There are always issues on IP rights that sometimes, especially if you co-create, you have to discuss early on. And then, I mean, when that is solved, I think the focus has to be, and it really has to be, you have some quick wins, right? If you're able to execute quickly, even with all the corporate constraints, and show some measurable results in the short term, that goes a long way into creating a good sustainable relationship, because then you build momentum around your startup, and you help the internal stakeholder to sell you internally, to convince people that is worth working with you. That's not a waste of time. I mean, corporates are quite often much more risk averse than startups and then entrepreneurs. So by going with a new solution, people are many times taking risks. So being able to have a really quick win reduces that perceived risk and helps them internally to sell the startups. I think from a taking again a small detour here, but I think from what I've seen in terms of the best partnerships or the best practices for partnerships between corporates and startups, there are some best practices that really define the most successful. And many of them are actually on the corporate side, but the startups can see when they engage in a new partnership if those characteristics are present. It's super important to have top level engagement. If you have CO engagement, even better, right? On the startup side, it will almost always be at founder level, but not always on the corporate side. So building these relationships at the top level can be difficult, but it really goes a long way, right? The second one is to be very clear up front about the cultural clash and align expectations, right? Of what will be the barriers, or at least recognize clearly that those will be barriers, and so that is more explicit than implicit. It's also very important to set very concrete and specific KPIs, right? So that's the best way to assess if the partnership is working well for both sides. And I think this helps keeping both sides honest about the progress. Set KPIs, but don't forget also to constantly monitor them and take action if they are not being met. Two other things. In many times, or most of the times, partnership between a corporate and a startup involves a pilot. And it's super important that the pilot is the right size, of the right size. If you do a pilot that's too small, you don't build enough confidence on the corporate side that you are ready for a rollout, right? If the pilot is too big, you run a big risk of failure, right? So when designing a pilot, both sides, the startup and the corporate, they should ask themselves, what do we need to prove to allow the corporate to make a decision, and keep the pilot at that size, right? So it's I would say it's the minimum required pilot, right? Making an analogy with a minimum viable product. And finally, another characteristic of the good engagement between startups and corporates is when that engagement is very focused on solving a specific problem. than a much more open and generic collaboration. This is, for example, how we do in Wayra, where we invest in startups, and we only invest in startups that have fit with Telefónica, that have a clear business opportunity to develop together. So from the beginning, we guarantee that this partnership is focused.
And I think that there's a couple of things there. Yeah, time to value, I think, is key. Delivering kind of value as soon as possible to demonstrate that the startup has a good hypothesis that actually can deliver. And I think the other point is, starting simple. I've seen too many startups get overexcited and go too broad with what they want to achieve, and actually all the corporate wants is one specific goal, really, and that's what they have in mind. I think one thing that I've always found useful, Bruno, and I'd be keen to get your thoughts on this, is kind of using annual reports as a source of insight to source potential opportunities to engage with that corporate. That's something that when I was going through my kind of startup and scale up journey, within our target audience, we'd make sure that we read those reports thoroughly so we could uncover pieces of insight that we could then use, throughout our proposition when engaging that particular corporate. So but just be keen to kind of know, is there any other sources of insight where startups can find those potential opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, so annual reports is a really interesting and quite often overlooked source of insights. You can see a lot of the priorities, a lot of how they approach progress, and the internal language that they use at corporate. I mean, the other source that we have to use is we all have, or we most have in our network, people that are close to that corporate in some shape or form. I think that those people can help you understand the corporate. I think they can help you in two ways. They help you understand the corporate, sometimes even better when they are external, but they are close. Eventually they will be even more open to talk. But also when you start working with a corporate as a startup, there are two due diligence processes that happen in parallel. One is the product due diligence and your company and your startup due diligence. The other one is almost, I would say, a personal due diligence, because a lot of the startup is on the founder. Having a connection, having someone, it makes it much easier, or let people much more comfortable on that softer side of the relationship as well.
Very sound advice. Very good. And what specifically is Wayra doing around 5G at the moment? It's obviously a very exciting technology. Really keen to understand, what are you doing and what are some of the opportunities around that?
Yeah. So 5G is one of the most important innovation spaces for the telecom industry of this decade, right? And the next decade eventually. And it has revolutionary capabilities, right? So just to people like understand what is 5G, what are the key characteristics? It's a very, very low latency technology. So it can react in a very short time, in thousands of a second, the reaction. It's extremely dense. So it has massive density. In 4G, the maximum support is 100,000 connections per square kilometer. In 5G, it's 1 million connections. It's an order of magnitude more. It's very, very reliable. The downtime is really low, and it can be used for mission critical activities, because the network can be on top of the high reliability, it can be selectively partitioned, right? And it can work in places that usually 4G does not work well because they are enclosed. So with all that, it's important to say that 5G is more than connectivity, right? It has a potential to transform every sector. It has potential to connect buildings, transport, services in a way that hasn't been possible before, right? From healthcare to transportation, to improve communication on how people interact and entertain. It has the possibility to transform customer experiences, right, in a way that was not possible before, right? In the UK, 5G is like a very important part of the digitization, right? It will be critical for UK's future digital success, and we've all seen in the current pandemic, right, how the digitization process was important, and countries that are more advanced, they could face better the problems, right? So so it's in summary, it's like a major arena where we are playing. There are three main things that we are doing, right? We have since some time actually investing in startups innovating in 5G. We've been doing that for some years, right? In two different places, in startups that are developing new use cases, but also startups that are developing tech and network capabilities for 5G. So we've been investing in those. The second, we are launching 5G labs across all our hubs in Europe. UK, our hub in London, was the first one to have 5G connectivity. But we are expanding those capabilities, and we are doing the same in all our other hubs in Europe. And then the third, we are part of Spring. So we also have like a focus program to develop 5G capabilities. So we have Spring in the UK, and we have other programs in other hubs as well. So those are, in summary, it's a very important arena, and we are doing those three main things.
And Bruno, you mentioned some of the user cases.
Yeah.
What I'm really interested in is, what are some of the user cases that you're seeing, and which ones are the ones that you think are kind of best applied right now?
Yeah. So we see, and then I'll actually, folks, I've of course been working in Spring. I've seen much more the use cases in the verticals that we are focusing in Spring, that are manufacturing, mobility, construction, citizen well-being in general, and then logistics and supply chain. So in manufacturing, there is, more and more shorter business and products life cycle, right? So manufacturing is in general under extreme pressure, and with margins being squeezed, more products to produce, more complex, workforces that are aging and becoming more difficult to maintain that knowledge. So 5G is really important in manufacturing. The low latency and high reliability, they can really support like critical applications. So some use cases, advanced maintenance, predictive maintenance. We can collect with 5G a huge amount of data to predict when a machine will fail. And with that, we can reduce the unplanned time. The 5G, I mentioned earlier, it allows a much more dense network. So we can really have equipment and parts of equipments connect to the network, and we can collect that data. We can also do a much more precise monitoring and control. This would be a second use case. We can monitor an entire plant continuously, adapt the process in real time, reduce defects because we have much more data. We have, when we look at AR, augmented reality, and we can bring remote experts for maintenance, for process control, for training, right? We can do simulations at factory processes. So it can also have impact in planning and design. So a lot of use cases in manufacturing. We have some similar use cases in construction. The construction is also always, of course, improving, looking to like improve security, lowering costs. So things like autonomous robots, control of site machinery, control of order status of materials and various components. A construction project is a major assembly line of multiple parts. So all this control. So there are also many use cases. What has been very much talked about is mobility, right? So, and then mobility, 5G can transform different aspects, can transform from personal mobility to logistic networks and everything in between, right? So one of the key challenges of logistic is the last mile delivery. And here, 5G can enable a much more granular data collection that can be used to real-time monitor what's happening, drive down cost, increase efficiency. It can do a similar thing with vehicle monitoring, right? Vehicles that will monitor not only themselves, but also the road conditions, the traffic, the pollution, so they can be more eco-friendly. A third one on mobility, something that can have a huge impact. It's called vehicle platooning. So having vehicles, especially heavy goods vehicle, traveling together, it can save, they can be up to 4% more efficient. This is of course impossible due to the highway code or distance guidelines or just good sense today. But with a 5G, with the low latency and the ability to run mission critical applications, this could be done, and we could have really a platoon of vehicles traveling together. Many use cases. The last one I would mention, it's quite different than the others, that are somehow similar, but it's in healthcare. In healthcare, there are many applications, both in let's say, patient applications, precision medicine delivery, real-time monitoring, hospital applications like VR training for surgical procedures, telemetry, so being able to monitor all the equipment that is in a hospital, in a way similar to what I mentioned earlier, how to monitor a manufacturing plant. Medical data management, right? So how to have records in real time being shared among teams. And then maybe there are other applications. I've heard the other day people speaking about ambulance drones that can, if not deliver healthcare, at least assess the situation before an ambulance arrives, for example. Right? We already have in our in our portfolio, we have one startup that they can connect the ambulance to the hospital with video connection. So when the ambulance arrives, the medical team at the hospital has already been following the situation since the patient on board of the ambulance. This is already reality.
That's phenomenal, right? So that is going to save people's lives to be able to monitor that close and have a latency kind of to do so as well. I think that's the key thing, right? It's about the ability to have that strong connectivity on the move. Really, really fascinating. I mean, one of the things we're very proud in the West Midlands to obviously have one of the large scale test beds for 5G. But also the kind of best 5G coverage within the UK. We're extremely proud of that. And now we have Spring as well. So it'd be great for you to kind of tell us a little bit more about that program and how some of the startups can get involved as well.
Yeah. So Spring is the UK's first 5G application accelerator. Right, and it really plays a very important role in positioning West Midlands as the UK's main innovation center for 5G. It involves large enterprises, scale-ups and startups, SMEs, public sector organizations, and tech vendors. So it really is quite broad, right? What we do in 5G, we bring together supply and demand to take business ideas and work together to create a proposition. So what do I mean by supply and demand? Supply are participants that will bring solutions like tech providers and startups. Demand are large enterprises, SMEs, public sector organizations that will consume those propositions. So Spring is about bring those two types of organizations together to work together on ideas and create viable propositions. It is delivered by a consortium. So it's O2, that there are the members of this consortium are O2, which was the largest buyer in the 5G spectrum auction 2 years ago. Deloitte, so leading professional services firm, Wayra, and then Digital Catapult, in partnership with WM5G. All right. So we are located in 3 facilities across West Midlands. Innovation Birmingham, our main hub, Wolverhampton Science Park, and the University of Warwick Science Park. So this is a brief description of what Spring is. When the business join Spring, they will, I mean, a few things. I mean, they will learn more about 5G and understand the potential, what 5G can do for their business. They will identify from all possible use cases, or from some of the possible use cases, which ones they should explore more deeply. I mean, there are many use cases and many business models that we don't even dream about yet, right? They will be able in the program to develop business cases and demonstrate that they are viable, and then last but not least, they will be able to have access to the test beds that we'll have in those locations to do, improve, and validate the technical feasibility of their use cases, right? How they join? There are 3 programs in Spring. One is called the Engage program. That's an introductory session. There is the Explore program, the more intensive, where you will build the business case. And then there is the Exploit program, where we take a specific use case and develop prototypes and proofs of concept and in a scaling plan. So business can join those 3 programs. I'll tell a little bit more about each one of them. So Engage is, the objective is to increase the core understanding of 5G, how it works, what features will be are applicable, and what are going to be available, when they are going to be available. Some of the features of 5G are not yet live in the network; it's being deployed. Potential use cases, right? It's basically to give business what we call a 5G readiness, right, and develop together an actionable plan.
A bit similar to Bruno, a bit giving people an overview of what 5G is.
Yes, it's a 12-hour program, so it's usually run to one-day workshop plus shorter panels to give understanding, right? So this is it's really broad. Each of those events, there are a lot of them. They bring up to 60 people and in the program. Then once companies are, this is the Engage, right? Once they are engaged, they move to the next program, which is called Explore, right? So they will create a solution, right, to solve a specific problem. It's a 2-week program, right? It's a business focused hackathon, right, that will deliver a solution, right? So it's again for supply and demand side, as the Engage is, but usually in a smaller groups. So we would have in Explore 10 demand side organizations, 10 supply side organizations, up to 10 working together, right? The next step is the Exploit program. This is a 5G acceleration program, and then this is really to move the next step and create a solution, right? That can be deployed and scaled, right? So in the Exploit program, we'll have startups typically supporting large organizations solve specific challenges, right? So corporates will come with the challenges. We create a bespoke Exploit program, and then we have startups, supply side organizations solving those challenges. So those are the three formats that companies can join. I mean, a lot more details are on Spring website, where they also apply for the program.
And I should say that it's a very clever spelling as well. So it's 5PRING. So if you replace the S in Spring with 5, you will find lots of details on the internet about that program. But genuinely lots of great opportunities for organisations across the West Midlands to get involved, to either learn more or to start to actually kind of work alongside Wayra more formally with some of those opportunities that may occur.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very, very, very exciting program.
Yeah,
to be part of. Yeah.
We've had a few questions come in. I think first one is Wayra coming to Birmingham? Well, I guess we've answered that a little bit. Is Wayra doing anything else in Birmingham, Bruno, outside of Spring?
Wayra is coming to Birmingham through Spring initially, right? And that's our main presence. We are, and we've seen in the last few years as a trend, but more strongly in the last few months, that the location is and the office is much less relevant. So in any case, we've always invested in companies across the UK, and actually in some cases across the globe, right? So we do have, when we scout for companies, we look for companies anywhere in the country. So while physically we are in Birmingham via Spring, we can work with companies from the region, and we are working with them as we speak.
And I guess it's up to the West Midlands organisation, startups and scale-ups to really kind of show you what we've got, really, and so you can kind of spend more time in Birmingham and West Midlands and do more stuff here. So that's good to hear. Another question. How has the issue with UA kind of impacted kind of the project and also kind of 5G? Are you seeing kind of any fallout from that?
No, it does not have any impact on the project. So we one of the partners of the project is O2, which is again part of Telefónica. And O2 has partnered with other suppliers for the 5G network, so it does not have any impact for us.
And then another question.
Yeah.
So Alan Blunt is curious to know how people and organisations can support you in helping the B2B startups. So are there opportunities for other organisations to get involved and support those startups during the programme?
Yeah, so the program is definitely. So the program is, the way the program works is by matching demand side organizations. And demand side organizations are large enterprises, SMEs and public sector organizations, with supply side organizations that are startups mainly and tech suppliers. So there is plenty of opportunity actually across all three engagement types or program types: engage, explore, and exploit. We bring together demand side and supply side organizations.
That's great.
I would strongly suggest and recommend to join one of our engage workshops where we kind of explain in much more detail how this collaboration works, and it's already the first step in this collaboration.
Very good. Yeah, lots of opportunities to really kind of get involved across the entire spectrum. So that's great to see. I've got one final question, but before I do, I'm going to encourage people, you can still use the Q&A functionality and the chat functionality to ask any final questions as we approach the end of this session. But I'm curious to know, what are some of the success stories you've seen through some of your programs? Keen to hear kind of some of the startups that have gone on to do kind of bigger and better things.
So, well, there are many. I will mention, Spring is the starting. So I'll bring some success stories from other programs or other situations. But there are two startups that are leveraging 5G, and those are the startups that I will mention. There are many more. Of course, in the relationship between Wayra and Telefónica, there are there are almost 150 startups working with Telefónica. But two startups, very, very, very different. So we have one startup. It's called Sensing Feeling, right? So they actually have a real-time sensing and analytics platform of people behavior in physical spaces, right? So they understand in an aggregate as a group what is the behavior of people. So they are used, for example, in an industrial setting or manufacturing setting to alert people of early signs of stress and fatigue that can impact, for example, safety, right? They can be used in transport systems to identify incidents, identify crowding, right? Alert when a driver or pilot is sleep deprived. They can be used to test satisfaction of customers in a retail, in hospitality, or engagement of students in an education setting. So you see from the use cases they have that they have to process an immense amount of data, right? And actually, Sensing Feeling was the first startup that started using our 5G connectivity in our hub in London, which is in place since last year. We have invested in them 2 years ago. They moved to our hub to develop and test their products, and they could really develop their product to leverage on 5G capabilities. So it's a product that will be able to offer to our customers. So it's a really interesting use case of 5G, and one of the early adopters in our portfolio. Another company in our portfolio is called, it's very different than Sensing Feeling, it's called Ori. And one of the key challenges of 5G is that with the immense amount of data that can be collected, this has to be processed at what's called the edge of the network, so not centrally. So to reduce the amount of data that has to flow from one side to the other. And then what Ori is doing, it developed the edge computing capabilities for the 5G network. So on one side, it was a use case, a very specific use case. Ori is much more on the infrastructure side and creating the 5G capabilities that will allow many others business to build upon.
Very interesting startups, yeah. Some very exciting kind of companies emerging now, especially around 5G. And I'm gonna go to Sally for the last question because I just love it. Bruno, if you were going to start an organization, if you were going to create a startup and apply it to 5G, what would you do and why?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. I've seen so many interesting use cases recently that it's really hard. I mean, one particular that I would say, I mean, I've been before joining Wayra, I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years in two different sectors, in the telecom more recently, and in energy, more specifically oil and gas before that. So perhaps a telecom application would be too obvious. Let's go into oil and gas. That's something very interesting. It's understanding and monitoring and sensing what happens in remote sites in the oil and gas industry can have an enormous impact on costs and productivity from one side, but also in safety and security. So that is something that I would very much probably would look into some detail on that on that space. I was involved in that sector before, and I see really a big potential for 5G in that sector.
I think what's really interesting there, Bruno, is, and this is what I see the best entrepreneurs do, is they take insight and knowledge from their career and all the industries and experience that they've been involved in, and then bring it all together to solve unique problems across all of those. And I think that's kind of, yeah, what you've done there, really. You've kind of said, actually, where I am now, I can apply some of that knowledge back into an industry that I used to be in. So yeah, really interesting to see. So we're just gonna finish off now. Bruno, it's been a fascinating talk. So much to take in, and I'm sure the audience completely agree as well. And again, so many opportunities around 5G in the West Midlands, and also kind of the spring program and stuff that kind of Wayra are doing as well. So thank you for your time today.